us down, searching for light when the world spins round. But in those cracks, the purpose is born, a new way to live when the old is torn. It's more than a story, it's the rise from the fall, a place where your purpose starts to call. With Dr. Stephenson, wisdom takes flight, turning your pain into hope, into light. Collide with purpose, embrace the change. Every story's got a fire in its flame. Tune in, listen, find your way to take life's hardest hits and turn the page. In the podcast, the truth is found. Collide with purpose, let love abound. From heartbreak to strength, the lessons unfold. It's about how we rise, not the stories we've told. Guests with their journeys, sharing their light. In every collision, there's power in sight. It's more than a talk, it's the wisdom we gain through every struggle, through every pain. With conversations that open the door to purpose, to power, to so much more. Collide with purpose, embrace the change. Every story's got a fire in its flame. Tune in, listen, find your way to take life's hardest hits and turn the page. In the podcast, the truth is found. Collide with purpose, let love abound. So come as you are, with your scars and fears. This is the place where the truth appears. Turn your trials into stepping stones. Find the strength to claim your throne. Collide with purpose, embrace the change. Every story's got a fire in its flame. Tune in, listen, find your way to take life's hardest hits and turn the page. In the podcast, the truth is found. Collide with purpose, let love abound. A collision with purpose, your journey starts here. In every conversation, we'll wipe away fear. Find your purpose, let your life ignite. With Dr. Stephenson, you'll find your light.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you're joining us from today. Welcome. Welcome to Life Changing Conversations to Inspire Actions, the platform where stories don't just inspire, they challenge you to move. Tonight, we're not just talking about success, we are talking about discipline forging structure, leadership built under pressure, and a lifetime that transitioned from service to legacy. Our guest today represents excellence at the highest level of military service, leadership, and community impact. From the ranks of the Jamaica Defense Force to international peacekeeping missions, to building organizations that continue to impact lives even after retirement. This is a story of structure, sacrifice, and sustained purpose. So tonight I ask you, what does it mean to serve? And what happens when service becomes your identity? Let us get into it. Joining us today is retired Regulating Master Chief Petty Officer Garfield Rowe, a decorated military leader, community builder, and Amazon best-selling author. With over 3 decades of service in the Jamaica Defense Force, he rose through the ranks to Warrant Officer Class 1, serving across land, air, and sea, a rare and historic achievement. He has served on international missions, including the United Nations Operating Restore Democracy in Haiti, and has received multiple national and international honors for his service. Today, he continues to lead through organizations, mentorship, and his powerful book, revealing the hidden truth about life as a soldier. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Master Chief Rowe. How are you, sir?
I'm great, sir. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure and it is esteemed honor to be on your show, sir. Thank you.
And it's an honor to have you on. Reading your bio, I say, who is this man? Who is this man? And I think that's a great place to start our conversation today. Because before the titles, before the honors, there was a foundation. And every strong life is built on what most people never see. Master Chief, take us back to your early life. What shaped young Garfield Rowe?
Sir, Dr. Stephenson, I grew up in a military parent. My dad was in the military. And at what point he was posted to the United Nation where he did his training, crossover training from a member of the band to a mechanic. And based on the system at the time, children under the age of 12 and if he was married would accompany him if the course was over a year. And so I lived in England for a bit of time in the early 70s. It was quite challenging. And what you call the prejudice was very high. And we were only black living in the community. At home, in the school, at church, we were the only black living in that community. So at that early age, the whole concept of discipline started to emerge as I had to have discipline to withhold the prejudice that was coming at me. But growing with a military parent, my father, and moving back into a park camp, because when my mother was trying to leave us in boarding school after my father ended his course, I decided that I didn't want to stay in England because of the prejudice at that young age as a child. So we moved back from the airport into a park camp where the structure of my life started shaping as they would call it at the time, a Zulu. When you grow up in camp or hang around military base, they refer to you as Zulu. So, but that's where I actually started the foundation of the discipline. My father was a soldier, and he didn't mince words, and wasn't afraid in those days. Parenting, he wasn't afraid. So that's where I started from.
Yeah, that's powerful. We share some things in common. We're both military men, both military men, and I also served in England, lived in England, served at RAF Milden Hall, and you was there before me. You was in the 70s. I served in the 80s in England. So we do share some things in common there, and that was some experience that I had, and I'm sure your experience serving in all these different places was something special. Just give us a little bit about that. Share a little bit about your experience sharing in foreign countries.
Again, as I said, we were the only black. The first time I saw another black child was when our school had a field trip and another school attended, and I saw only one other black child at the time. But I was constantly trying to defend my honor and my race, because, at that time, black and white, the segregation was real. It was very real and was very powerful. And so that is one reason why I opted to move back to Jamaica. And so coming back to Jamaica from living in England, I was a look forward for me. I was there with my two siblings, my two younger sisters. Well, one older sister and a younger sister. And because I was the only boy, I was the only one defending myself. I don't think that they had so much pressure as I did. But I was literally fighting periodically every day to defend my honor. So moving back to Jamaica actually, and into Upper Camp, shape another family bond where the military brats, as they would call them, grew up on a military base. I meet another set of kids that know structured, coming from, all of us had military parents. And so growing up in that environment started shaping who I was without even knowing that it was shaping my lifestyle and what would happen years to come.
Very interesting, because I recall When I was in England, we had the Brixton riot, and the government had no clue how to deal with people of color. They were lost. So you're so correct in what you're saying. And I worked in race relations at the time on the base, and we had to go off base to help them manage some of their situations dealing with races and all the riots and stuff that was going on over there. So I'm sure that you had some interesting times there. But let's get back to our conversation here. You know, what you have become didn't happen by accident. It started somewhere very intentional. So, Master Chief, you were deeply involved in the cadet force. What did that experience instill in you?
I think that's where, I mean, my entire accomplishment actually started from the Jamaica Combined Cadet Force. My brother was a sergeant in the cadet force when I started basic school at Kingston Secondary. And because he was a sergeant, he quickly involved me in the cadet process. And when I got transferred to Arden Cadet, when I went start going to Arden High School, I was transferred to the Arden Cadet Unit. And from there, I was a very senior cadet at the time. I rose very quickly to the rank of company sergeant major. And so, having gotten to that rank and being on the school compound, the school and the principal relies on the cadet when it comes to flag raising, ceremony, certain sporting activities. The cadet will be very involved, and that was one of my responsibility. So coming from there, and see my father and just living in a military environment, that kind of strengthened the idea of me wanting to be a soldier. And that was a platform, the Jamaica Combined Cadet Force, that was strategically set for me to use that as an avenue to develop myself in becoming a soldier. Most interestingly, whilst in the cadet force, it so happened that I was the first cadet for the Jamaica Combined Cadet Force, the first battalion, to be appointed as a regimental sergeant major for the cadet, which is a very powerful rank in both a paramilitary organization and the JDF itself. So being appointed the very first regimental sergeant major for the first battalion Jamaica Combined Cadet Force, that in itself gave me that platform where discipline, training and development, moral, self-esteem, esprit de corps, all of those factors was what was required at the time for you to be a strong leader. And in looking forward to join the JDF, this certainly was the platform to start from.
Now, Master Chief, your achievement as the only cadet RSM did not happen by accident. There was some level of alignment happening there. What does discipline truly look like when it is developed early? Because there has to be some serious discipline exhibited by you. What does it look like?
Well, most of my peers and subordinates saw me as a strong disciplinarian. I was very feared within the cadet force because I was very strict on discipline, dress and deportment, everything that came with structure was what I was bringing to the table at the time. And the person thought I was even taking it too seriously from a cadet perspective because, hey, we're just cadets, we're in school. But I took it very serious as if I was still in the military, and that's where I started out, by being a strong disciplinarian. My fellow cadets would tell me later on that, you know, they feared when I came on parade and they were not up to speed because they know that I would find them wanting. And, you know, they were, when I approached, some set of nervousness kick in because they know that I was a no-nonsense person. And so building from a military background, my father being in the military, growing along with other strong military person that I grew up with as my friends, parents, molded me in a way that this, you know, I start looking at structure from a very early age. And it helped me and grew me in becoming not just the first cadet to be appointed for the first battalion, but history would have it in JDF history and the Jamaica Combined Cadet Force history as the only cadet RSM from across the breadth of Jamaica to serve as a cadet RSM in the cadet force, join the military, and retain that prestigious rank.
And a prestigious rank indeed. And that level of achievement should not be taken lightly. Should not be taken lightly. You know, I have worked with several schools in Jamaica. And one thing I noticed when I'm working with cadets, there's a certain level of discipline
Yes.
is exhibited with them and their ability to perform, not just in a disciplinary way, but academically as well. They seem to stand out. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes. On the hand, you couldn't have a cadet that wasn't doing well in school.
Mhm.
You know, we always want, and especially trying to let them grow within the cadet force, because if you're in a paramilitary organization like the cadet force, we want to see you developing as you go up in the different levels in school. So in first form, you're a recruit. Second forms, you're a cadet. You know, by third form, you're an NCO, whether it be a lance corporal or a corporal. And so we instill in our cadets that not just being a disciplinarian, but from an educational perspective, we wanted cadets to set the standard within the schools as well. So they're looked up as educators as well as a disciplinarian. And that worked in our time, at least, when I was a cadet. And I think that still continues today.
Absolutely. So, Master Chief, for those watching right now, especially young folks who are trying to find their footing, what is one habit you believe that that can change their lives, the trajectory of their lives that they should integrate into their life? What is one habit you'd recommend?
Add value all the time. It's,
Mhm.
it's one of my pet peeves when I said add value, meaning that you should always learn to improve on what it is that exists
Mhm.
to make it more efficient and work for you. Oftentimes, we come and we see a system in place and we just adapt to the system. So
Mhm.
I would say to them, what if we could change that system to improve on its performance and improve on your performance? So let's begin adding value, because if you're not adding value, you're remaining constant. And if you're not adding value and you're not remaining constant, you might be taken away from that value system. So I've always said to my cadets, and when I joined the JDF, always add value. Always try to improve on something that exists for it to work more efficient and more effective.
Mhm. So look where and find gaps
There you
and
go.
solutions.
There you go, sir.
That's what you're saying. Awesome. And that's just advice that not just for young people, but for everyone and
For everyone.
anyone. So thanks for sharing that. Very important. All right. So let's talk about growth through service, your growth through your service. And we know that leadership is not given, it is earned, and often is earned under pressure. And what we find that pressure reveals what discipline has built. Master Chief, you rose through every rank. What did each level taught you about leadership? Each rank that you went through, what did you learn about leadership through those ranks?
Well, initially when I joined the cadet, it was a peer pressure coming from my dad,
Mhm.
um, who back then parents thought that they wanted their children after graduating school to be doctors and lawyers or pilots. So my three siblings before me were neither pilots or doctors. Um, but they didn't fall off the radar either. They just simply weren't what my father would have liked them to be. And
Mhm.
so I remember one day I had to go to him for lunch money, and he said something similar to these words, that he didn't have any lunch money to give me because it doesn't appear that none of us coming out to anything positive in life. No, that's not something you want to say to a child. But again, as I said, none of my three siblings before me were doctors, lawyers, or pilots. And that's what he wanted to brag about. And so I took offense to that statement that he made, because seven brothers, seven different minds. And if they didn't even become a doctor or a lawyer, who said that I wouldn't? So don't try to stop me in those tracks. So those words I use as stepping stones, those same words. And I told myself that I'm going to prove my father wrong.
Mhm.
And so that is where my whole everything I touched turned to gold, because I decided everything that I did, I wanted to do it at a certain standard and at a certain level in life. And so, those words really impacted my drive for success in everything that I did, so to speak.
So leadership under pressure are not just words for you. You lived it.
I lived it. I lived it. And especially when I started training, unfortunately, I was injured in my basic training and I had to be airlifted from the training depot to KPH, where I did some serious treatment before going back into this. In fact, another person thought that I would not be fit enough to come back to serve. But one thing I learned, that when I came back, not fully fit, because I was doing like physiotherapy 3 times a week for at least 3 years. And it set me back as a regimental sergeant major in the cadet. Coming into the military, I was being taken advantage of because they didn't see me as a real soldier. They saw me as someone that was healing. And so I suffered a lot by being overlooked for development. I was turned into a cook. I did all kind of odds and ends job that I didn't want to do because I wanted first and foremost to be a soldier. And so one of the things I had to do to get ahead was to mentally suppress my injuries and to tell myself that, listen, I'm not going to let this injury stop me from being where I want to be. So I stopped going to physio. I mentally suppressed my injuries and I forged along. And it was not until I got to the rank of regimental sergeant major, several years after that, I did the surgery that was affecting me, where I moved that disc from my lower back. Several years after, coming from the injury during my basic training.
And we're talking about pressure.
Under pressure.
Under pressure, right? But here we are. You're here today. You sustained it and you did well with it. You made it work for you. From your dad.
I decided not to give up. I decided that I wanted this and I was not going to allow any form of injuries prevent me from going where I wanted to be, because I still had something to prove to my dad.
And what you're saying right now is so important. And I want you to say it again for those young folks who are listening, the ones who cave in so easily. How important is it for them to sustain whatever is coming at them? Because one thing about life, things are going to come at you. Pressure is going to come your way, but we must stand firm in the face of pressure. So I just want you to repeat, how important is it that we must not cave under pressure?
You have to keep your eyes on the goal and your dreams. I remember the first time I was arrested. I don't like talking about this because I'm afraid of jail. But the first time I was arrested in the military was when they tried to turn me into a military cook. And I was taken from an environment where I was out in the field. But because of my ailment, they thought that putting me in the cook field would probably help more.
The chef.
And so I was detailed to go be a cook. And I told the corporal when I went to the class, he saw me being very lost in the field. And I said, what happened? I said, I don't want to be a cook. Because if I wanted to be a cook, I wouldn't join the jail. If I go to Pegasus or Wyndham Hotel, go look a chef job. And the corporal said I was insubordinate and arrested me. And so the regimental sergeant major at the time, who was a friend of my father, when he released me from jail, he said to me, listen, Rowe, whenever you get a course in the military and you're getting a certification, go ahead and do the course. You can figure your way out afterwards, but do the course. So I did the course and I cooked for a year. And as he said, I found some way to get out of cooking so I could go back to being a real soldier.
And we're not saying being a cook.
We're not saying that cooks are not soldiers, but I didn't want to be stuck in that field. I want to be able to patrol in the street and do those things that, real soldiers really do.
It was not just for you, right? All right. So, rising is one thing, but leading is another. And again, we're talking about leadership here. So, Master Chief, what separates a leader from someone who simply holds a position?
I had to go through a lot of that. I went through a lot of challenges because when I start leading, I was under severe pressure because sometimes my fellow regimental sergeant major who served in the same rank as I did, they wanted to move from the enlisted rank as a soldier to a commissioned officer. And so I figured that they would rather give up leadership to turn yes men so that they could be commissioned later on. And and that was not me. I couldn't do that. I like transparency. Leadership is something that is instilled in me where you lead from the front. You make unpopular decisions, right? You do things that if it's you alone making the right decision, I will stand alone making that right decisions. That's what my leadership taught me. And so on many occasions, I found myself under a lot of pressure because if my soldiers were absent without due cause, then they would have to be reprimanded, while other regimental sergeants would allow their soldiers to go without being reprimanded. And so I was seen as the disciplinarian and the strong man. Nobody else is doing what you're doing. And that in itself reflect on your leadership skills, your leadership desire. I could go into a conference with my superiors, and one of my superiors would be saying something that politically may not have been correct. And I would say, with due respect, sir, that is not correct. And my fellow regimental sergeant major would say, no, the officer is correct. What are you saying? But then when we leave and we go down to the quarters, you're right. He was talking nonsense, but they wouldn't say it because, again, they don't want to weather the storm. But for leadership, you have to position yourself where you can make unpopular decisions. You can challenge certain decisions if it's inferior to what it is that the soldiers, or will not benefit the soldiers, or will cause the soldiers some sort of harm. You have to stand up for those soldiers, and you have to be very firm in doing so. So leadership plays a great role in the ability to influence even your commander if they're going off course, and stand true to the cause without thinking of being retaliated on or you think you overstep your boundaries. As long as you do it with the respect for the job, and you do it with respect to whomever you're correcting as a superior, then that's what leadership entails. Unfortunately, I had persons around me who was doing the same job as I was, that was not performing in that way. And those persons and I never get along well at all.
It's interesting that we're having this conversation, because we're in 2026 and we see situations where decisions are being made, and not all good decisions, but we're also seeing that people are following orders that they don't believe are valid orders, but they still follow them. Yeah, so interesting conversation. And
in fact, Mr. Dr. Stephenson, I remember a particular case where I was given an instruction by the 4th Sergeant Major. I didn't agree with the instruction that he gave me. But again, the military, you follow orders. So you comply and then you complain. That's the structure. So in my own defense, I would say today, the 4th Sergeant Major, sir, let me go on record to say I don't agree with the instructions you're giving me, but you're my superior and I'm going to follow those instructions. And I did. And then I would take that matter and address it afterwards, because that's what the system is about. It's not about being in discipline, or because I believe what I'm saying is right, I should not follow the instruction I'm given. I will go on record to say I don't agree, but I will follow the instructions, and then I will address it in the correct forum thereafter. That's what leadership is about.
Yeah, and address it through legal channels. So indeed, that is the life of a soldier. It's a soldier's story. You follow orders, and then you seek ways to
that is right. Yes, sir.
Indeed. All right. So leadership, again, we're still talking about leadership and pressure, right? So leadership is truly tested when everything is uncertain, and you have dealt with some of those. You served in Trinidad during a coup attempt. So, Master Chief, what did that experience teach you about crisis leadership?
When you join the JDF, you're mentally prepared to deal with warfare, because that's the business that we're in. And so when the coup attempt in Trinidad, when the Muslim Abu Bakr, they stormed the Red House during a parliament session, shot the prime minister, took control of the radio stations. I think they did this during a Trinidad and Jamaica is similar in their culture in terms of football. So I think they had a football match in Trinidad, and the entire Trinidadians were, police, off-duty soldiers. Everybody was going there. So they strategically planned that assault, and so when they took over the Parliament building and shot the Prime Minister and took control of the police stations and the military base and the radio stations, they had full control. And so, as CARICOM regions and part of the CARICOM peacekeeping force, the JDF was invited to be a part of the peacekeeping force that went into Trinidad. Now, I was summoned to go. It was in my company that was going, but the company commander at the time wanted an experience. At that time, I was in the administration. I was a clerk, and so he wanted a good administrative clerk to go with him. So I was summoned. It was not my company that was going, but I was summoned to go. And I took up the challenge, feeling that, hey, this is some action after all. I mean, this is what I'm trained for. So I wasn't, some people when they hear about war, they go and hide and they duck. And so I was looking forward to it because this is what I was all about, some to go and exercise my military standard and training, and to go and make a difference. And so I was more than honored to have gone to Trinidad and to serve in Trinidad during that time period. It was a bit frightening because you don't know what you're going into, you don't know what to expect. But mentally, when you train as a soldier and you're disciplined, then you apply yourself to the circumstances and just, adapt to the circumstances and the situation at hand, which is what I do.
And I'm talking to a soldier here who did not want to be a chef because he wanted to be a real soldier, right?
Yes,
your words. And here again, there's this thing about a soldier that is a desire to see action. You don't feel complete, right?
That,
and when
that is true, sir.
it comes, you want to definitely step into the game, right? And that's where you were.
That's exactly where I was.
Yeah. So interesting, amazing. But now, so you had to deal with crisis, and then there's global responsibility. So tell us about your role in the United Nations mission in Haiti. What stands out the most there?
All right, I had several IT training throughout the JDF. As I told you, I was sent to several departments before I mentally took charge of myself. One of the things they said, okay, because of my injuries, they turned me to a cook. Then I went in the clerical field. From there, the world was being computerized in the 80s. So I decided that I want to be a part of that computerized world. So I did the aptitude test and, was afforded the opportunity to go to what we had called the data processing unit at the time, DPU, of the JDF. And while there, I developed certain skills and certain training. So at the time when they restored democracy in Haiti, they wanted a set of peacekeepers to go into Haiti as well. And at this time, each country was given a slot, and JDF was given a slot for an information technology sergeant to warrant officer. Now, the warrant officer who was to have gone, he was getting ready to leave the JDF. And so I was given the opportunity to fill that slot in IT. But because of the training that we got in Jamaica, I went to a couple, we were self-taught in most cases, but then I went to vector design and I did some mainframes, repairs and all of that. And so when I got into Haiti, we were prejudiced against. When I reported for duty, the guy looked upon me, what Jamaica knows about computers, we are supposed to be backward, third world country, what we know. I was wearing a CARICOM patch. So they tested me immediately as I got there. They sent me to do a job, and which was pretty simple. And I did the job and I came back. I eventually became known as a little Jamaican, the little black Jamaican that would refer to me, because based on my training through the JDF here and my experience, I went in there well prepared. And so there was not a job that I couldn't accomplish when I was serving with the United Nations. And so even the chief of staff of the military, who was a Canadian, and the general, who was from the US Army, there we had the United Nations civilian staff, and then we were there as a military staff. So the civilian staff would give us the equipment, we would configure them and distribute them. At that time, most soldiers just had a laptop to their desire, but they know to care for it. So we had a lot of misuse. But my training at Vector Design in Jamaica and my experience at the JDF, learning and building and repairing computers, really made me a popular guy. So much so that when nobody else could fix the issue, the general secretary would refer to me as the little black Jamaican, send for the little black Jamaican. And so the chief of staff had his laptop and he wouldn't give it up. But he had a problem, but he used it for his daily briefing. And so when he called me, he gave me the laptop overnight. I had to wait until he was finished his conference in the evening. I took it home, and up to 3 o'clock that morning, I had it trying to repair it. But certainly enough, when I returned that morning, the laptop was repaired. Now, when the United Nations saw that, they wrote Jamaica, indicating that they wanted me to stay until the entire mission was. I was only there for 7 months, but they wanted me to stay until the entire mission was completed. Now, safe to say, I was making a little bit more extra money because only 2 of us from Jamaica were working in the United Nations headquarters. We had several soldiers there, but they were living in tents and in the camp-based environment. So we worked with the United Nations. We lived in the hotels. But the US government did not want other countries to be a part of their team. So the US took everybody who was in the hotel that were not from the US force and gave us $2,000 to find place in the community to live. And that $2,000, I ended up spending about $200 out of it because we grew up with the Bangladesh and the Canadians, and we found a complex and we shared that facility. So out of that $2,000, I spent roughly about $200 for accommodation. And what had happened is that we were still getting paid back home, and we were getting an additional $500 for every Jamaican soldiers in Haiti. So I was making like $2,000 more than everybody else. And that never went well with some of my colleagues. So when the letter came that they wanted me to stay, I believe the system didn't look more on my accomplishment that I rose the Jamaican flag high. They were looking more on how much money I was making at the time. And so they decided that I shouldn't stay until the mission was completed. I need to come back home. And that was a decision that was made by, because when Jamaica got the letter, they sent it to the chief of staff. The chief of staff sent a letter to my commanding officer. Luckily enough, I was making enough money that when I got my 2 weeks leave, I was able to fly to Jamaica. So he saw me an interview and he said, well, listen, we got a letter from the United Nations, but these are some of the reasons why we can't let you stay, because you're looking to take over the IT department. The warrant officer is leaving. Your daughter is doing common entrance, and she need a father figure. And they told me every other reason why I shouldn't go. And then my command officer said to me, so what do you think? And I said, sir, with due respect, 6 and 1, a half dozen the other. My tenure was for 7 months. If that time has come and I have to come back home, that's fine, sir. However, I'm aware that everybody knows that I'm making additional funding, and I believe that's the reason why I'm not being sent back to the United Nations. They pulled me back. So, I mean, it's a system. I have to work with my command.
It's always working with your so-called superiors and commanders and whatever we call them, right? But it was all about the money.
Yes.
Just follow the money, right?
Follow the money. A lot of people knew me back then because I was sending things on the Coast Guard vessel. The Coast Guard vessel will visit like every month or every 2 months or so. And I would be sending down things on the Coast Guard vessel. So I became known, and persons start knowing that we were making additional money. And I was just a mere sergeant in the army, living in an hotel. my commanding officer was living under the tents. And we're getting a little bit more privileged treatment, and person thought as a sergeant maybe we shouldn't be exposed to that. So I think it has to do with a little bit of the Jamaica crab in a barrel syndrome, where if you're trying to get out, other persons want to pull you back because they're the one who should have been there. But I don't have anything to do. I wouldn't necessarily beat the system for that. It's just individual within the system that behave the way. Because I will never disrespect the JDF.
Absolutely.
As an entity and an organization. But certain persons in certain command, I would say, would make such a decision.
All right. So we're going to move to life after service, because your life is more than service, much more. So, it is so that some people retire, but leaders like yourself reposition yourself, because your purpose doesn't end. It continues to evolve, right? So after such a decorated career, how did you redefine purpose post-retirement?
It just stemmed from the continuous of doing work while I was in the JDF at the different levels of my rank, because I came up through the ranks. And during the different stages, I was always organizing something. I was always structuring something. I remember one year the JDF was not paid because there was a glitch in the financial system of the government. And when you get monthly paid and you wait a month, and when it's time to get paid, you don't get paid because there's a system issue, then soldiers' morals start falling. So I remember going to my regimental sergeant at the time. I was a sergeant, and I said, "Sir, instead of the usual sports afternoon that we run up and down, and so why don't we have a sports, a concert for the soldiers, just to raise their morale?" And my regimental sergeant major, Mr. Isaac, then gave me the go ahead. So we're just going to do a little bit of concert among ourselves. But then I thought bigger. I started thinking outside the box. I said, why not get the artists them from Jamaica, the Bunty, the Beanie, the Bojo, to come and perform for us, free of charge. So I went out and I started visiting the studios. And I went to the studios and I started talking to these big artists. I said, guys, we patrol the streets of Jamaica so that you can have your shows and your financial gain from that. What happens if you give us some sort of support by coming to us and showing your presence? We're having a little concert, past show. And so I said, soldier man, we'll have, and once I got the bigger acts to come in, then everybody, so I had the biggest stage show in Upper Camp in 1997. I call it Camp Sting, because every known artist in Jamaica was on that show, free of cost. Bunty, Beanie, Bojo, Juna Reid, Frankie Paul, Winnie Wonder, Frisco Kid, every known artist I got. It became one of the biggest show the JDF has ever seen, and I don't think that can ever be repeated. But that's what I do. I go there and organize. So to be a regimental sergeant major 5 times, 1 for the cadet and 4 for the JDF, where I served in the 2nd Battalion as a regimental sergeant major, the Support and Service Battalion as a regimental sergeant major, the Coast Guard as a regulating Master Chief Petty Officer, and the JDF hearing as a regimental sergeant major. Being a 5-time regimental sergeant major instills in you that level of structure where you go and interestingly enough, Sir Stevens, each unit that I served in at the time when I served there, when I served in the 2nd Battalion as a regimental sergeant major, they're dominating the force. History would have it. They're winning Queen's Medal, the march and shoot, the football competition, the swimming, and whatever they don't win, they're either 2nd or 3rd. When I went to the Support and Service Battalion, that moved with me. The Support and Service winning the football, the Queen's Medal, the march and shoot. So, I could go on and on. So when I went to the Coast Guard, which is a smaller unit, themselves and the Air Wing, they're the 2 of the smallest units, but the 2 most expensive units of the force, because to put up a vessel on patrol and to put an aircraft in the sky, it's very costly. So the soldiers there don't have time to be more into the sports in like the infantry and the support. But when I got to the Coast Guard, who was always battling for last them on the air in a sporting event, I decided that, no, you're not going to be battling for last. You're trained just like anybody else. And for the first time in 50 years, Coast Guard came and learned to win athletics. That the fastest time in the march and shoot. They won the football, they won the swimming. So under my leadership, everywhere that I went, that unit dominates, which is where the add value, the name add value, start resulting, because I didn't only tell them about add value, I demonstrated the add value since the system, how the system works. And so that's how I got the name add value, because everywhere I went, value was added.
You're always adding value. Now let us talk about your work here in Atlanta. You built an organization, you founded an organization, and you also, I also want you to talk about Up Park United Association. So let's talk about those two.
Okay, when I retired from the JDF and I moved to Atlanta, one of my colleagues who I trained with in the training depot, he knew my skill sets, and he told me that there was a lot of Ardenites from Arden High School that lived in Atlanta, and prior to me coming here, for 11 years they've been trying to get them formed as an alumni, and many persons came, start, and it stopped. So I said, okay, I can take that on, but I'm not just doing class of the 80s of class of 90s. I'm forming a reunion of all reunions. So I'm doing all classes. And so I end up structuring a committee. And once I got the committee in and I started showing them the ideas, we have had one of the biggest reunion any high school has ever seen. We have had 350 past students coming into Atlanta for a 3 days reunion of all reunions. And so that Atlanta chapter was formed. Now, once the Atlanta chapter was formed, we were always thinking about giving back. And so I decided that as soon as we formed the chapter, we would now look at what are our short-term and long-term goals in giving back. And what we did is a scholarship program. And that scholarship program is working today. In fact, the first 2 students that we sponsored were the valedictorian for Arden, top student, for the 5 years that we had sponsored them. And so what we did, there were the Canada alumni, Jamaica alumni, New York, and other locations, Florida alumni. But when the Arden formed the alumni for Arden Atlanta chapter, what it did, it ignited the rest of the chapters were there for many years. And right now we have brought everybody together. And what I did, I also founded a president body for all the other chapters that was in existence. So we're all on one accord. Because when we were forming, Florida was trying to have an event when we were launching our inauguration. And we were saying, we had a bit of conflict. So I'm saying, why not welcome a new baby? If you've been having it 5 years and we are now coming online, give us a privilege to launch your chapter and come join us. And we're able to get that done. And because of that, I decided that we also need to form a board of presidents so that each other chapter knows what they're doing. And so that is working today. Once I was done forming the Arden Alumni Atlanta chapter, I was then approached that, hey, we have a lot of ex-soldiers living in Atlanta. So I did 2 years as president, handed over for the Arden, and then I started now with the Jamaica Ex-Soldier Association. There are persons living in Atlanta 30, 40 years before I came here. And when I was asked, I said, well, okay, since I did the Atlanta and it was done so nicely, I was asked to do the Ex-Soldier Association. And that too was another major success. For inauguration launch, we had 240 persons attending a banquet, dinner dance, and an award ceremony. So it was, again, another major input to give back to fallen soldiers. Our soldiers are not doing so well. And so that driving me to not only serve and make an impact within myself, but to give back was a major part of my growing up and think that, you should always look from where you're coming. Don't throw stone behind you. And so doing that was another major success. I was then approached when I was getting ready to hand over the Jamaica Ex-Soldier Association to its new president. I was approached by the Jamaica Combined Cadet Force to form the Jamaica Combined Cadet Force Alumni International Body. And I said, guys, I'm tired. They said, well, I hear that you did the art and you did and there were major successes. And I said, okay, guys, what I can do for you, I will lead you as a foundation president for the first year, put the structure in place, using the template that I've used for Arden and the JDF, and I will just do that and add it over, which I did. So I formed the Jamaica Combined Cadet Force International Association alumni, and I handed over within a year, giving them the structure. And when that was done now, I decided that the kids that grew up in our camp, we needed to form another body as kids growing up in camp. And the idea came to me, and I reached out to some persons, form a committee, appoint a chairman, and we decided to form the Upper Camp United Alumni. And we're having a reunion in May 29th, 30th, and 31st in Jamaica, where it all started, back at Upper Camp. So that is something that I looked at again, and I said, you know, if we all grew up in camp, what is it that we can do to give back to somebody else, another soldier kid? And so we're doing this major launch where we'll be having a meet and greet on a Friday. Saturday, we will have tour Newcastle and some of the Kingston base for people who have left here so many years ago. And then we have a formal dinner dance at Curfew Place, where we award some campites who grew up among us and had made international impact, like John Barnes, who scored in the World Cup. We have Conscience, who is an international reggae singer. All of those guys grew up in our park camp. So we're planning to do an award ceremony for those persons attending. And then Sunday, we have a church service in our park camp, a tour of where we used to live in our park camp for persons to relive those moments. And then at the end of all of that, we want to form a scholarship program with the JDF Credit Union. That is in progress. That's something that we feel strongly about and everybody's on board with. And so we're looking forward for that to happen, for us to give back to other soldier kids having passed through Upper Camp ourselves. So that's and I think that's been my final project. I think I need to rest now.
So always adding value. All right. So you're also an author. I'm going to pop something here on the screen. And what's this all about? Revealing the hidden truth about life as a soldier.
I mean, during my military career, it's a lot of ups and downs, challenges, and having been the only person in the history of the JDF to have served land, air, and sea in a lateral movement as a regimental sergeant major. It's a rare. I don't think it was ever meant to be. I don't think it will ever be repeated, because you're either in the Air Force or in the Navy, or you know, but you're never moving in that lateral movement in the same rank across four units, and I was able to do that. And based on my IT experiences and what I've done on my mission when I went to school in Fort Garden, you know, they wrote Jamaica. I was an international student with a 96.2 grade point average. One of the first international students to attain such a grade. And I just keep doing things. And so persons keep saying to me, why don't you write a book about your story? Because not many people will tell your story for you, especially if people think that, you know, people usually see me as somebody who is upright, and, you know, some people determine your ability to be show off or bossy, your standard. Right? And I think that's where people misunderstood me, or I'm show off and bossy. I would put myself nicely together. I will represent myself well. I will attempt to do the best at everything that I attempt to do. And people misunderstand that and say, I'm show off, I'm bossy, I'm go on like. So I get that a lot. But not many people tell my story. And so when persons keep saying to me, why don't you tell your story? Why don't you write? Because of what you have accomplished and the challenges. And then not only that, the JDF is structured in a way, you know, that instills discipline and the values and all of that. But not many people on the outside would be able to see the JDF for some of the things that we internally go through. Now, without trying to put the JDF in any disrepute, I decided to write the book and name it Revealing the In Truth About Life as a Soldier, because there are some hidden factors like biases, favoritism, those things we experienced while I served. And people on the outside wouldn't even know. When I was joining the JDF, I couldn't put that I came from Tivoli or Waterhouse. They would not accept you. You have to put a Beverly Hills address, because they figured that people who come from those areas were just going to be gunmen and troublemakers. But there were actually persons who came from those areas who probably would have eyed where they came from, but they're actually from those areas that came in the JDF and made an impact on the JDF. So I spoke about some of those things. I spoke about favoritism, biases, and some of the challenges that I personally went through having served in that lateral movement on land, air, and sea.
Mm. You know, I'm going to answer this question. I want you to get into the camera as close as you can and identify one person, only one, who you credit for the person that you are right now, who supported you, who shaped you to become the person that you are right now. And I want you to call them by name and just say thank you to them.
Well, truth be told, it's not just one person, so I'd be biased if I did that. But I can call two names specifically. One of the names is Colonel Daniel Price. Colonel Daniel Price was somebody who I knew when I was a young soldier. I didn't know him before, but he was one of the persons in the training depot when I was training as a recruit. And over the years, I've seen him very, very officer and a gentleman. But he did something. He believed in me. And when I was in the Information System Center as a senior warrant officer for the IT department, I got to the IT department where I was maxed out in promotion. There was no other rank to attain as an enlisted soldier, so they had to commission me. I had to cross over to the officer corps, and I don't think they were ready for me at that stage. So I got to the stage where I thought that I could go no further. And so I did the regimental sergeant major course. And so when I went and I did the regimental sergeant major course, I came second on the course. And my battalion wanted a regimental sergeant major, but nobody was looking at me because I'm an IT guy. I'm fixing computers. So usually the regimental sergeant major comes from the infantry battalion or the training depot, right? And so I decided that, okay, I need to find out why is it that I'm not being looked at. Having done the regimental sergeant major course, you need a regimental sergeant major. I came second. So I went in front of my command officer, then Rocky Mead, who was CO commanding that battalion, and I requested an interview. And I went there and I represented myself. Sir, why is it that the battalion requires a regimental sergeant major? I did the course, I came second. And he said to me, well, there are other better candidates. So I asked him, sir, with due respect, what do you use to measure who is better than who? Because I did the regimental sergeant major course among all the top guys in the field, and I came second. So what do you use to measure who is better than who? And he rocked back in his chair, and he kind of, because he's been advised that you get regimental sergeant major from the drill sergeant of the infantry. So he's been advised. So when I said that to him, he really stopped and he thought about it. And from there was born an interview, RSM interview, because later on I was called on an RSM interview, and I went and I saw everybody that was potentially a regimental sergeant major type, and they had an interview put together, and at the end of the interview, a female sergeant who worked in the headquarters called me and said, Garfield, you topped the interview, but you're not going to be promoted, because they have already earmarked some persons for the 3 vacancies that was existence, to include in my unit, but you're going to be in the next set of promotions. And then I got a call from Colonel Price indicating that he opted to take me from the IT department into the 2nd Battalion to make me his drill sergeant major. And so that's what gave me the opportunity from the drill sergeant major to become an RSM. So Colonel Price believed in me and took me from the IT department into his unit when persons were not very comfortable, person who wonder where this IT guy going to be the drill sergeant, what does he know? Not many of them knew about my cadet background in any case, but they stereotyped me, and again, you know, I had to go there and prove my worth. So Colonel Price is one person I would give credit to, as somebody who believed in me and helped me to be where I got to in my military career. And then secondly, I would say Regimental Sergeant Major Stumpy Lynch. He and my father served in the band, very short fellow, but he was one of my role models. When I saw him drilling, his whole persona, his stance, his leadership, you know, I emulated Regimental Sergeant Major Lynch. And those are two persons I would credit, you know, and my father who, you know, you go wrong, you get a little whooping and get it back on track. So my father also, I would credit. And last but not least, God Almighty.
All right.
I give him all the glory.
All right. Appreciate that. We wanted one, you gave 4. And time is on us. We are at the hour mark. So one more question, and I'll give you the opportunity to make a closing argument. If you could give one message to future leaders, what would it be?
I would talk to future leaders to maintain standard and professionalism throughout their decision making. Build on structure, because once a structure exists and you build on it, it can only enhance what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And I would also say to any leader now, don't forget the add value syndrome, right? Some people say if it's not broken, don't fix it. That's not me. I'm saying if it can be improved upon to be more efficient, fix it. And so that is one several advice I would give, you know, professionalism, discipline, standard, structure, and the add value syndrome. If you put all that together, you'll be a remarkable leader and you'll be leading from the front.
Absolutely. And you rightfully said it. It can always be improved. Always be improved. You know, you use the word structure quite frequently. And you was at an event where I spoke. You was also a speaker there. And you know that structure was one of the things I played on quite a bit. That is how important structure is. All right. So as we get ready to wrap up, Master Chief Rowe, final thoughts.
You know, when I wrote my book, I autographed my book by saying, with God, all things are possible. All right. And that's a fact. Before I had my personal experience, we would think that whatever we do is our own doing. I come to learn in my latter years that God should get all the credit. Everything that I did was because he gave me the knowledge and the power to do what I did. But because I've been a disciplinarian for so long, you know, I believe in structure is what plays a part. My father gave me structure. My family gave me structure, right? When I joined the cadet, it gave me structure. The JDF gave me structure. There's systematic way of doing things. And if you are able to build on those structure that we speak about so frequently, it aids in the direction that you're going, because there are different layers, you know, that you need, and different steps that you need to take. And if you're following those layers and those steps, and you're adhering to the rules and the guidelines and the principle, then it helps you to become the person that you ought to be. And as long as you're fair. Because one of my pet peeves too is development of individuals and not just your own development. So you look out for the next man. You don't just come in and start growing and you bypass everybody and you go and you glorify yourself. Always look at, why is this man not where he ought to be? Why are you here? I remember I moved some corporals who were 10 years in the rank as corporal, and you have some 3-year-old soldiers becoming sergeant. And I said, why, when you become a sergeant, you sit down and you're served. When you're a corporal, you go to the mess hall and you stand in line for your food. So I'm saying, why would you want to be 10 years in the rank and don't want to go and sit down and be served? And I move them up, and I call them in on interviews and I tell them about development, because as a leader, a lot of people didn't want to go and leave because they fear that when they come out, they lose their job. No, train people to take your job. But be proud enough that you know that within yourself, it won't be that easy for them to take it. But don't be afraid to train. Don't be afraid to pass on knowledge. So that is one of my things that I did. I love to pass on knowledge. I like to train people, and I like to tell people about structure and the add value syndrome, because it worked for me and I know it can work for others. Even writing this book, I became the first soldier in the history of Jamaica to write a book, because nobody from the West Indian Regiment till now, as an enlisted soldier, has written a book. I've had a Major Ford who wrote the core values. I've read about another officer, I'm not sure what he wrote about. But from an enlisted soldier's point of view, nobody writes. So many times when I want to learn about the JDF, I have to talk to an old soldier. But if you write about what happens, you can read it. And so I'm hoping that my book will encourage other soldiers now to write an article and write their stories.
And how can someone watching get the book? Where can they go to get the book?
The book is on Amazon. It was one of Amazon when it just came out. Amazon, hot new release bestseller. It's very concise. I made sure, even though I was speaking about revealing the hidden truth, there was no discredit to the JDF itself. A lot of times when we talk about issues or things going on in the organization, it's not the organization, it's a few people who join the organization. So when I speak of any of these things happening, it's not the organization I'm talking about, because the JDF is a well-oiled engine that is running and will continue to run. But I talk about certain command structure that came in and created havoc, and I can speak to those issues. So I want people to go on Amazon, get the book. I will be donating some books to the JDF for them to put in their libraries and for others. And I've, from time to time, go ahead and do book signing in different countries and give away books. But it's on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and there's a barcode that takes you to Stripe, which is another platform that you could purchase a book. Just means that I would have to mail it to you if you scan the barcode there. But if you go on Amazon, you'll see the book in both the Kindle version and the hard copy.
All right, so go out there and get your copy. Must read. All right, so man, time is up. Way past the hour. All right, so first let me say thank you, Master Chief Garfield Rowe. You've shared wisdom, knowledge, and you're not just talking, you walk your talk. You've lived it. I just want to say tonight, we didn't just hear a story. We witnessed what happens when discipline becomes identity, when service becomes purpose, and when leadership extends beyond uniform into legacy. Master Chief Rowe, he reminded us of something powerful. He reminded us that you don't rise by chance, you rise by structure. And he's used that word, if I was counting, probably 200 times tonight. And that's how important it is, structure. You don't lead by title, you lead by example. And he is that example. He's led throughout his military career by example and after service by example. And you don't leave a legacy. And I just want to say that one again. Too many times we believe that what we're doing is leaving a legacy. You are building a legacy daily. And that is where we need to focus, and not focus on leaving one, but building one. So the question that I asked him today is, what will you do with the information that was shared with you tonight by Master Chief Garfield Rowe? What will you do with the information that was shared with you? Because information consumed and not used is useless. Would you agree with that, sir?
That is true, sir. That is totally true.
Information consumed and not used. This is life-changing conversation to inspire actions, where we don't just talk, we move. And my guest tonight is the one and only Master Chief Garfield Rowe. And sir, I give you the last word.
One of the questions that people ask me all the time, which unit of the 4 unit that I served as in the lateral movement, land, air, and sea, which unit would have been my favorite unit? And I would repeatedly say the Coast Guard, because the Coast Guard is, the culture is different, the dress is different, the structure is different. I had to kind of relearn a lot of stuff when I went to the Coast Guard as a regulated Master Chief Petty Officer. And it was quite challenging. But what happened was that even though the Coast Guard thought I was coming there to regiment their structure, they didn't want me over there because they thought I was coming to regiment what they were doing, and they were kind of freelance and a laid-back unit. But I went and I added value, so much so that they end up appreciating the fact that I was there. So the Coast Guard was different, was challenging. I had to learn a lot of things all over to manage the process. But I give credit to the commanding officer at the time, Commander Ching Fang, who gave me an entire briefing so that I could hit the ground running. And so, Coast Guard to date, which is why I adorned that uniform on the front of my book. But all in all, the JDF has its purpose. The JDF has brought out a whole lot of leaders in this country. And we're there for a reason and a purpose. And I want person to understand that the JDF is an organization that is really built on structure. You only find some commanders and some decision makers that will make 40 decisions at a time. But that has nothing to do with the organization. It's fully intact. And if I had the opportunity to serve all over again, I would go back through the same organization and serve. I love the JDF. Thank you, sir.
What a way to end it. All right. Good night, good morning, good evening, wherever you are, just like we started. This is life-changing conversation to inspire actions. See you next time, next Wednesday, same time. All right, we're out.
We've all had moments that break us down, searching for light when the world spins round. But in those cracks, the purpose is born, a new way to live when the old is torn.